These are the deepest deep dish I've ever owned. Welcome to Vintage Weights PGH. If this is your first time stopping by my channel, I like to review vintage weight plates, barbells, dumbbells, anything to do with strength history. So please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and check out this video on the very rare Paramount deep dish. In this video, I'll go through the characteristics of Paramount Deep Dish. I'll talk about the different generations, as well as the historical connections to that guy Arnold you may have noticed in the opening. And then I'll give my opinion of why I think these are extremely collectible. Paramount Deep Dish were used at Muscle Beach and at Gold's Gym, both frequented by Arnold Schwarzenegger in the prime of his bodybuilding career. Along with BFCO, these are probably the nicest deep dish plates that Arnold lifted during that time, and you can see them in many photographs and videos of him at those locations. So now let's take a look at them. Paramount Deep Dish are a 3-spoke deep dish with fairly narrow lettering, sometimes numbered, sometimes not. There are 3 generations of Paramount Deep Dish. The first generation have rounded rims and are unmarked, meaning no number 45. The second generation have flat rims and are unmarked. That's what I'm holding right here. The third generation would be marked Paramount Deep Dish, which have a 45 numbering. To those new to collecting, that might seem like a small difference. All 3 of those things might seem like small differences, but when you get into the collectability of something, people like the variations, just like any other hobby. As far as the value of them, the rounded are very sought after. Well, I should say all 3 of these are very sought after, but the rounded seem to be more rare than the other 2. The other 2, the unmarked that I'm holding here and the marked Paramount Deep Dish, are still extremely collectible though. Paramount Deep Dish, as I said in the opening, are the thickest deep dish, the deepest deep dish I've ever owned. They are more than 2 inches thick. York Deep Dish, Weider, Jackson Deep Dish, all of these extremely collectible deep dish are 2 inches thick. I know that 5/100ths of an inch, 6/100ths of an inch might not seem like that big of a deal, but it does stand to reason that they're in first place when it comes to the deepest of deep dish, in my opinion. Something interesting to note is that all 3 of my unmarked Paramount Deep Dish are just a little bit thicker than the 2 marked deep dish that I have. I currently have 5 Paramount Deep Dish. Now let's check out the weight tolerance of these unmarked and marked Paramount Deep Dish. The unmarked were all within about a ½ pound of 45 pounds. One of them was a little off, so I used a couple Vintage Gains calibration plates to bring it up. The marked Paramount with the 45 numbering were quite off. One was 40 pounds and the other one was 42 pounds. So I put the lighter one back on the scale and I used Vintage Gains calibration weights to bring it up to 42 pounds so that at least I'd be lifting with a pair that weighed the same amount. Head to Micro Gains now to pick up your own Vintage Gains calibration weight plates. I put these on a modern barbell, an American Barbell Chewy bar, and they had very little play on the bar. One thing I did notice that was concerning was that all 3 of my unmarked deep dish had slightly off center holes. If you look at the center hole of the unmarked deep dish that I have, all 3 of them are about 1/8 an inch towards the Paramount. The Olympic and barbell side is just a little thicker. Why does this matter? Well, it doesn't matter that much, to be honest. With this small amount of off-center, it doesn't affect the travel of the barbell or the feel of the barbell when you have the weights on it to any kind of great degree. It's really just something that's slightly off in the quality of these particular 3 deep dish. I did see a couple other collectors when I started looking around at Paramount Deep Dish that theirs also are slightly off center by about 1/8 an inch. So if you have unmarked Paramount Deep Dish, Put them on the barbell and see how they spin. If they get a little wonky and then settle, that means they're not center. I also noticed that all three of my unmarked Paramounts had machining on the hub. That probably had something to do with the center hole being off center. Maybe there was some overflow in the casting process, something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but it's a safe assumption that it's related. Kind of cool to see the machining though. I always like machining. Speaking of machining, when it comes to the overall casting quality of the Paramount deep dish, I am pleasantly surprised. On the rims, there are some machining marks, which shows that they took care to remove some of the casting flaws. They didn't just leave it a rough casting. The face of all 5 of my Paramount deep dish are very clean casts. There aren't any casting flaws except for one tiny little bubble on the letter A on one of the unmarked. Other than that, very clean casting. When it comes to the design of the Paramount deep dish, the spokes taper off to a 0 drop at the edge. The rims, I have the flat rim. The rims have a squared off back, which is typical because of the way the mold was, but it's not that sharp. And then I wouldn't call the front edges rounded per se, but they do have a slight rounding to them that make them comfortable in hand. When it comes to this inner edge, it's a pretty good 90-degree, but with a slight rounding to it, which adds to the comfort. And then the hub itself, I would say, is a somewhat steep hub. For those out there that like to hub lift, I wouldn't say that this is as much of a 90-degree angle as a Canada International, but it's pretty on par with a York deep dish hub. The 3 spokes obviously make it different than York deep dish to have 4 spokes, but what I really like about the design of the face of the plate is how, with the 3-spoke design, the lettering goes into each third of the face. The lettering, as I mentioned, is a narrow lettering with silver paint. Even on the unmarked that I have that have patina all over the lettering, I can still see some of that silver underneath. I think these were originally black paint with silver lettering. I can still see some of the black paint underneath the patina. Now, at this point in time, I only have 45s. I have these 5 Paramount deep dish 45s. I did have some 35s and I think a 10 a while ago. So if you check out this video, you can see what the other plates look like in the Paramount deep dish set. The only deep dish are the 45s, kind of like York barbell deep dish. The only deep dish are the 45s in most of the sets. What I'll say is a knock against the Paramount set is that the rest of their set, 2.5 through 35 pound plates, are pretty much a York copycat. And in the video I just referenced, you can see what I mean. They look very similar to the York 2.5 through 35 pound plates. So overall as a set, that's a bit of a letdown. The most desirable part of it would be these, the 45 pounders. That's not to say the rest of the set isn't collectible. I would just say that the rest of the set is collectible versus the 45s being extremely collectible. Now let's get back to Arnold. Arnold Schwarzenegger is undeniably the GOAT. He is the greatest bodybuilder of all time and one of the greatest strength athletes of all time. When it comes to seeing images of him, I mean, some of these are just ingrained in your memory, and there he is lifting Paramount deep dish on Muscle Beach at Gold's Gym. They aren't the only weights that Arnold ever lifted. I'm sure he's lifted hundreds of different kinds of weights. So what makes these special? Well, when it comes to Arnold's career, Muscle Beach and Gold's Gym are probably the 2 most famous places that he frequently lifted weights. So then whenever you look at those pictures and images, Paramount deep dish and BFCO deep dish would probably be the 2 most desirable of those weights. So then the historical context adds to the value and the desirable nature of these vintage weight plates. When I think through the marked versus unmarked, on one hand, the unmarked have the slightly off-center hole. However, they are a little bit thicker than the marked. The marked have a less desirable weight tolerance, at least the pair that I have. If anyone out there has marked Paramount deep dish, please weigh them. See what they weigh. Are they doing any better than these? And it's not to say all unmarked are within, a half pound of 45 pounds, but my 3 are. I did see one interesting unmarked that weighed 54 pounds. That was a little off the mark. So always weigh your weights. And like I said before, head to microgains.com to pick up Vintage Gains weight calibration plates to bring your weights into tolerance. As far as why I like these, you add up the historic relevance of them with Arnold with all of the nice characteristics, how thick they are. They're the deepest of deep dish, the nice clean casting, the very equal looking front face of them, the very clear and sharp lettering. I can't say enough about this design. It's just a classic design from a classic era, and I really enjoy them. So these are, in my opinion, extremely collectible. If you've enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by dropping a comment and letting me know what you think of Paramount Deep Dish. You can also support the channel by shopping for modern gym equipment in any of the links below, or shopping for anything on Amazon through my Amazon link. Thanks so much for watching. I truly appreciate your support. This is Rob at VintageWeightsPGH.